My next guest has an answer to that and many, many more. Please welcome to the show America's accountant, Dan Geltrude. Dan, thanks for taking the time out on this Monday afternoon. All right, you saw the numbers like I did. What was your initial reaction, and where do we go from here?
I was pretty surprised, Scott. Based upon all the reports and predictions, I should say, of what was going to happen, certainly we came in a heck of a lot better than we thought we would. So I thought it was really positive news. Based upon Omicron and what that impact was going to be, we saw a nice, now I'm going to say this, recovery, not creation, recovery of jobs. The president is taking a victory lap right now, talking about all these jobs created. That is absolutely not true. We are only in recovery.
Well, I wrote an op-ed last weekend that came out on Sunday, and I said the exact same thing. So that's probably dangerous that we're both on the same page here. I used a different word, not created, but I called it reinstated, right? We just opened the doors back up to some of those firms that we closed up, and now these people went back to work. And that, you're right, that's not creation. And by the way, because the numbers are still so fresh in my mind, Dan, we have about 3.5 million-ish, that's about the right number of, we're behind as far as the high of April 2020 when it comes to jobs. We're still 3.5 million behind. Now, once we get over that number, I said, fair point, you can call it creation after we get back over that number. But up until we get to that number, it's just going to be reinstating and not creating. And I think that's a big difference, don't you think?
Well, that's where it really goes to the point of what you're saying related to the economy. Once we get back to, shall we say, where we were, what happens with the economy? Do we really cool off? Now, listen, I may beg to differ with you a little bit. I think the economy is hot right now. I think it's going to stay hot for a while. Why? A lot of people have a lot of money and they're willing to spend. You simply can't get the things you want. So at some point in time, I don't know when, and no one does, supply will catch up with demand. When that happens, Scott, that's the true test of where we are with this economy. Are we going to be able to grow past where we were, let's say, at the height of the Trump administration?
Okay, great. You brought up a good point. I'll push back at you a little bit. I say it's fragile because, yes, things look good on the surface. But how much of a shock can it take? And what I mean by that is this. Macy's is cutting back hours because they can't find the people. How many restaurants do you know that just aren't open as long as they'd like to be open because they can't find people, right? So they either can't pay the people or they can't find them outright. And to that point, we've had, since last April, over 4 million people per month leave the workforce. They call it, obviously, you've heard about the Great Resignation. So that's one thing I think the economy could do maybe a lot better, but we still are kind of hindered by this labor shortage or whatever's happening with this Great Resignation. And I think that that's not good for the economy because I think we could do a lot better. But having said that, here, I'll throw this at you, and I want to get what your reaction. All right, so let's just say that they bring inflation down. I think the next CPI number is going to read hot, all right? But let's just say they bring it down to, say, 4.5%. But in doing so, Dan, you know that raising rates is going to slow the economy down, right? Even as hot as you think it might be. So how do they handle the fact that we might see a 4.5% CPI, but we might have a 4.5–5% unemployment rate?
Well, right. This is the balancing act that the Fed has been forced into. I don't think that we're going to see the Fed come out hot and go for a 0.5 point next month. I still think they're going to be a little bit tepid here, and they're going to just go with a 0.25 point, see how that plays out. Because, Scott, nobody wants to actually cool down the stock market. The economy, even though they're not the same, the economy and the stock market are not the same, but rising interest rates will probably have the same impact on both. And right now, to take down the rise in the stock market, which I believe the market is more fragile than the economy, I think there'll be a lot of people really unhappy with the Fed. And we already know the Fed pays attention to what people are saying. Well,
it's much more political than it ever used to be. You're exactly right. And I think that I'm coming back around to your point here on this one, because I do believe that they'll probably choose, if there is if they get the Mike Tyson moment where they do get punched in the face, I think they'd rather choose to let inflation run longer and hotter than anybody would ever have expected, rather than raise rates sharper and faster than anybody expected. What do you think about that?
Well, if you want to be political about that, right, Scott, right now, inflation, you can blame that on the White House. If you start raising interest rates and the economy cools off too much, the market overreacts to that, who gets blamed?
100%,
the Fed.
right.
And so when you look at it that way, Jerome Powell may say, you know what, I'm going to go easy here, as you said, let inflation run a little longer and let the White House take the heat for that, not me.
Yeah, because I think that's also something that they're worried about. I mean, this isn't our 1979, back in the day when we had, Volcker do what we needed to do and the country swallowed that medicine just fine. Nowadays, the country's really not prepared to have something like that and swallow the medicine, which we absolutely need because of this inflation problem. So I think that going forward, they're going to err on the side of politics, I think, a little bit, and you might see them let this thing run hotter and longer than you and I both expected. So that's what I don't understand, how we can be calling for 6, 7, or 8 hikes. You know what I mean?
I do. And you know what's going to be interesting? And I don't know if this will happen, but let's say Build Back Better gets passed, at least in pieces, right?
Right.
What's that going to do? That will probably heat things up even more. So we're obviously borrowing, or going to borrow money. I don't care what the administration says, to be able to have Build Back Better, right? Now you raise interest rates to cool things down, and what happens? Everything gets more expensive. It makes no sense to me, Scott.
We're going to be talking a long time about this, Dan. I really appreciate you coming on because you spur me on to some other new ideas, too. Really appreciate it. America's accountant, Dan Geltrude, thanks for being on the show here today.